And a very good morning. It's time for us to get into this morning's installment with Mr. Nico Kleynhans.
Good morning. Listeners often approach me for help, and their questions tend to fall into one of three categories. The first is how to make investment decisions, and those are usually people who've realized they're going to retire and they haven't applied their minds and they don't know if there's enough money, and now they're hitting that panic stage that hits most people who've delayed the decision for too long. So that's one category of questions I get. Then I get also a category around debt management. They realize that they are earning well, but more than 40% of their take home salary is going just to settle old debt. And the 60% that is left over is not enough to fund their lifestyle. And they are now also beginning to panic. And as debt becomes more expensive, those calls are increasing in frequency. And then I get just plain, I don't know how to manage money kind of questions. And those too are increasing because it's a symptom of what's happening in our society. Now, what shocks me is often these questions come in an email form, which is what I want. I can't take calls. Then listeners are hoping I'm going to be able to give them an instant answer. And this is not about instant answers, because what they don't realize, the problems is not around money. Often the problem has to deal with emotions. It has to deal with relationships with money rather than money itself. Let me give you an example. A couple of years ago, I had a client who took home about 70, 80,000 a month. Now, she didn't have any children, and so one assumes that 70 or 80,000 take-home pay would be enough. Well, it wasn't. And no matter how hard she tried, the area she struggled most was with her credit card. She would every month complain that she couldn't settle her credit card in full. Eventually, I sat down with her and I said, bring me 3 months worth of credit card statements. Let's go through it together and see what the issue is. And the first month we looked at, she seemed to manage her activities fairly okay. But then on one day, she blew 20,000 rand on a new laptop. Now, this was a couple of years ago when 20,000 rand was buying you a very, very fancy laptop. And I asked her, what happened? Why did you need a new laptop? And she said, well, my dog died the day before. And I was feeling so broken, I didn't know how to cope. And so I left university and went for a walk. And I passed a computer shop. And I thought, I need to feel better about something. So I bought the laptop. I said, okay. Did the laptop help you feel better? And she said, no, it didn't really help me feel better. We went to the next month. I said, you went to a holiday resort or a hotel, and that also cost around 20,000 rand. What happened? Well, my boyfriend and I had a fight, and I didn't want to go home that night. And so I booked myself into this fancy hotel. And I was able to go to work because the hotel is in the town where I'm working. And I was able to go to spa treatments. And I said, did that help you? Did it help you feel better? And then she began to understand why her response to stress was stuffing up her relationship with money. And that was where the problem was. So in her case, what she needed to do was to start a course of therapy, because what I had to offer was going to deal with some of the practical issues. But she also needed to learn how to make herself feel better without throwing money at the problem. And that was what I mean when I say sometimes it is our emotional response to money, it is our emotional response to stress that creates the financial difficulties that we have. And so when people come to me, often I'm saying it's a matter of dealing with emotions, it's a matter of mentoring, and it's a matter of practical things like what do we do with money. But let me try and explain this by telling you about Mrs. X. Now, Mrs. X got married, and from the day she got married until today, her husband has never contributed a cent towards their marriage. In fact, after a couple of years, she basically told him to go and live somewhere else. She never divorced him, but he was not helping at all. So on her own, she had to educate her two children. She got them into decent primary schools. She got them into excellent high schools. And she got them to get post-matric education and to get qualified. And they did. Interestingly, they both got married to men who did not contribute a cent, who've also been kicked out of their marriages, and they've also now taken care of their own children. But each daughter has not only got a decent job, has purchased their own family homes, and has funded them themselves. Mrs. X owns 3 properties. She's busy building a block of 6 apartments. By the time that block will be finished in a couple of weeks' time, she will be debt-free. Mrs. X has accumulated savings. If she dies today, she's worth in excess of R1 million. Do you know what Mrs. X does for a living? She's a housekeeper. But what Mrs. X learned a long time ago was that she needs more than one income stream, and she put it in place. She learned that she has to focus on building up security for a family, and she did that. She's not afraid of asking for advice. She's not afraid of sacrificing to achieve. And so Mrs. X, who takes home a fraction of what many listeners take home, has managed to build up security for herself and for her family. It's not always about how much money you have. It is about the attitude that you have towards your life and the attitude that you have towards money and the attitude that you have towards your income streams. Folks, it's not always about what life has dished out to you. You can get to where you need to be, but you need to recognize when you need help. Have a good day.
Thank you, Mr. Nico.